The last time my father saw the house my sister lived in, he was in a wheelchair. She didn't come to the door. She watched from the window, and she didn't wave. That was October. He died in February. She didn't come to say goodbye. She said she was busy. I want to tell you a story that started in 1990 in a small town where everyone knew everyone, where my parents worked themselves to the bone for 30 years to build something for their 5 daughters, and how one of those daughters decided that what they built was hers. Not stolen in one moment, not taken in one dramatic scene, but slowly, quietly, over 2 decades. The way something can disappear from you so gradually that by the time you notice it's been gone for years. There are 2 things I need you to understand before I tell you the rest. The first is that my sister Carol genuinely believes, to this day, that she deserved everything she took. The second is that my father never got to sleep one night in the home we built for him. Not one night. Hold those 2 things, because everything else I'm about to tell you fits inside them. 7 people in a small apartment. My parents, Frank and Helen. 5 daughters, 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen table where we did homework in shifts. My father was a young man when he started his family, barely in his 20s when the first of us arrived. He worked in the forest, timber cutting, up before sunrise, home after dark, hands that told the story of every year he'd worked. My mother worked on a farm. Between them, they made enough to keep us fed, keep us clothed, keep us together. They had a plan. They always had a plan. They bought land first, saved for years to buy it. A plot outside town where they would one day build a house with enough rooms for everyone. And then an opportunity came. An old house. Needed everything. Roof, walls, plumbing, windows. But the price was right and the bones were good. My mother sold the land. My grandparents gave everything they had saved. I want to say that clearly because it matters. My grandmother and grandfather, 2 people who had worked their entire lives with their hands, who had never had much and had kept what little they had with the careful discipline of people who know what it means to have nothing, gave my mother every dollar they had saved. Not a contribution, not a gift from abundance, everything. My grandmother told my mother, "It's yours, Helen. Build something for your girls." 3 generations of work went into that house. My grandparents' savings, my mother's land, my father's weekends. Carol was 20 that year, the oldest of 5, loud, confident, the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately began rearranging it. When my parents showed her the house, she walked through every room. She didn't say, "This is wonderful, this is what you've worked for." She said, "This room gets the best light." And she stood in it for a moment longer than necessary. I was 12. I didn't understand what I was seeing. That same year, Carol got pregnant. She married Ray, a quiet man from a family that had opinions about everything and helped with nothing. They moved in with his mother. It lasted 8 months. Carol came home on a Tuesday, walking, 10 miles, with her baby son in her arms. She didn't call ahead. She knocked on the door of that small apartment, 6 of us already living there, and my mother opened it without hesitation. That's who my mother was. 3 months later, Ray came too. His family, who had opinions, did not come to help move boxes. They were, as Carol put it, offended. By what exactly was never made clear. I remember my father carrying Ray's boxes up the stairs. Ray watched. I remember thinking even then, at 12 years old, that this was a man who was very comfortable being carried. So now there were 9 of us. My parents, 4 daughters, Carol, Ray, their baby son. 1 apartment, 1 bathroom. A kitchen table where we now ate in 3 sittings. My father and Ray sharing a wall of a room that was never designed for 2 families. And the house. The house my mother had sold her land for. The house my grandparents had given their life savings for, was sitting on the other side of town. Empty, waiting, needing everything. It was in this situation, 9 people, 1 bathroom, no space, no quiet, that the idea was born. The idea came from Ray, which tells you something. He said it quietly, reasonably, the way reasonable-sounding ideas sometimes turn out not to be reasonable at all. He said, "What if Carol and I moved into the house? We'd help finish the renovation. We'd pay you back for it, monthly, whatever you need. And once we're settled, once the house is done, we'll help you build your new place. The one you planned, the one with enough rooms for everyone." My parents looked at each other. 9 people, 1 bathroom, a kitchen table that wasn't big enough. My parents said yes, because Carol was their daughter, because Ray seemed serious, because the house was sitting empty and their family was overflowing, and because when you love someone, you find ways to make the impossible feel manageable. That's what love does. It's also sometimes what love costs you. We all helped with the renovation, every weekend for 2 years. My father after his forest shifts, my mother after her farm shifts, Diane and Susan and Beth and me, sanding floors, painting walls, carrying things, learning what it means to build something together. Ray's family did not come. They were still offended. My grandmother pulled my mother aside during one of those weekends. I wasn't supposed to hear. She said, "Helen, make sure it's in writing." My mother said, "She's my daughter." My grandmother said, "I know. Make sure it's in writing." My mother smiled and changed the subject. I was 14. I didn't understand what my grandmother was afraid of. I do now. The payments came when they came. $200 in March, nothing in April. $300 in June, nothing in July and August. My father kept a small notebook. I found it years later in his bedside drawer. Every payment recorded in his handwriting. Date, amount, running total. He never said anything to Carol about it. My mother never said anything to Carol about it. They were her parents. You don't chase your own daughter for money. So they didn't chase. They waited. And while they waited, the money that did come went on school supplies and winter coats and grocery bills because 6 people don't stop needing things just because the plan changed. The new house fund never grew. I counted the notebook once after he died. 14 years of payments. The total was $31,400. I don't know what the house cost exactly. I know my mother sold her land for it. I know my grandparents gave the savings of their entire lives for it. I know my father recorded every payment in a small blue notebook that nobody was ever supposed to find. Nobody ever sat down and did that math out loud. Maybe because nobody wanted to see what the number meant. Years passed the way years do when you're busy surviving them. Carol and Ray finished the house. It was beautiful. I'll give her that. She had my mother's eye for detail and my father's stubbornness about doing things properly. She also had a habit that developed slowly enough that I almost didn't notice it. She started referring to the house as something she had built, not renovated, not purchased, not paid for over time with my parents' patience. Built. "We did everything ourselves," she would tell people at family gatherings. Ray would nod. No one in those conversations mentioned the weekends. No one mentioned my father's hands. No one mentioned my grandmother's warning. My father got sick in his mid-40s, Lyme disease, from a tick in the forest where he had worked for 20 years. It moved through him slowly and then quickly, the way these things do. Walking became difficult, then impossible. He was in a wheelchair by the time I was 30. Our apartment, the one we had lived in since before the house, the one we had never left because the new house had never been built, was on the 2nd floor. No elevator. My father could not get outside without help, could not feel the air without someone carrying him down 2 flights of stairs. We suggested to our parents selling the apartment, but Carol and Ray said no. I want to be precise about this because it matters. Ray, the man who had watched my father carry his boxes, who had taken my parents' house with monthly payments that never quite added up, who had not brought his family to help with a single weekend of renovation. Carol said no. Ray said no. She said they had paid for everything themselves. She said the apartment was a family asset and she didn't agree with selling it. She said, and I remember this precisely because I wrote it down that night, Everything we have, we earned. I'm not responsible for other people's choices. Other people. Her parents. We stopped speaking after that conversation. Not with a fight. Not with a door slamming. With a silence that filled the space where a family used to be. My sisters and I, Diane, Susan, Beth and I, sat together that evening. We didn't discuss it for long. We just said, we'll do it ourselves. We will find an apartment for our parents ourselves. And we did. The new apartment was on the ground floor of a new building on the edge of town. We reserved it before we had the money for the deposit. Then we found the money. All four of us together, every spare dollar, every saved amount, every small sacrifice added to the pile until the pile was enough. The renovation started on a Saturday in March. My father came to see it. We helped him down the stairs of the old apartment and drove him across town and helped him through the door. He sat in his wheelchair in the middle of an empty room with bare walls and exposed wiring and concrete floors. And he smiled. The kind of smile that has something else underneath it, something grateful and sad at the same time. He said, "It's going to be beautiful." I believed him. I thought, we made it. We got here. It's almost done. That was March. My father was hospitalized in November. He died in February next year. He never slept one night in that apartment. The week before my father died, Carol and Ray did not come to the hospital. They sent a message through a neighbor. They were hurt, the message said, by things that had been said. My father spent his last weeks asking about them. Not with anger, he was never an angry man. With the quiet bewilderment of a parent who loves a child who has stopped loving them back and cannot understand why. My mother told him Carol was fine, that everything was fine. She said it every time he asked. She said it right up until the end. I don't know if he believed her. I think he wanted to. Carol and Ray came to the funeral. I want to be precise about this because I've thought about it many times since. They came. They stood in the right places. They accepted condolences from people who didn't know the full story. They shook hands. They nodded at the right moments. What they didn't do was cry. What they didn't do was speak to my mother for more than 3 minutes. What they didn't do, and this is the part that has stayed with me longest, was look at the photograph of my father that we placed at the front of the room. The one from the forest, young and strong, before everything. Other people looked at it for a long time. Neighbors, colleagues, people who had known him for 40 years. Carol walked past it without stopping. I watched her do it. I don't think she knew I was watching. Or maybe she did and it didn't matter. I'm not sure which is worse. After the service, my mother stood by the door thanking people for coming. Carol and Ray left without saying goodbye to her. I saw it happen. My mother saw it happen. She turned back to the next person in line and smiled and said, "Thank you for coming." Like it hadn't happened. Like 30 years of everything hadn't just walked out the door without looking back. That smile, that particular smile my mother used in that moment, is something I will carry for the rest of my life. It was the bravest thing I have ever seen anyone do. 3 months after my father died, we were finishing the apartment. Carol and Ray drove past one afternoon. We know because a neighbor mentioned seeing their car slow down outside. They didn't stop. They didn't knock. They didn't call. They drove past a building where their mother and sisters were painting walls in memory of a man who had asked about them in his final weeks. And they kept driving. We finished the apartment in April. My mother walked through every room. She stopped in the kitchen, ground floor, wide doorway, space for a wheelchair, and she stood there for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "Your father would have made his coffee here every morning." That was all she said. We didn't respond. There was nothing to respond to. Some sentences don't need an answer, they just need to be heard. It's been 3 years. My mother lives in the apartment, ground floor, wide doorways, close to the store. Everything we suggested, but Ray and Carol refused. We visit every week, all 4 of us, sometimes together, sometimes separately. The kitchen smells like her cooking. There are photos on the walls. My father in the forest, young and strong, before the ticks and the years took what they took. Carol and Ray still live in the house my mother sold her land for, the house my grandparents gave the savings of their entire lives for, the house we all built with our weekends while Ray's family stayed home, offended at something no one has ever been able to name. I drove past it once last year. There were new curtains. It looked well kept. I kept driving. My grandmother died 4 years before my father. She never knew how the story ended. She never knew that the savings of her entire life went toward a house that her granddaughter would one day call her greatest personal achievement. Sometimes I'm grateful she didn't know. Sometimes I think she deserved to know. I'm not sure which feeling is more honest. I've been thinking about what my grandmother said. Make sure it's in writing. She saw it coming years before it arrived. And my mother said, she's my daughter. Here is the question I cannot answer, and I've tried, believe me, I've tried. Was my mother wrong to trust her? Not naive, not foolish. Wrong. Because on one hand, she was her daughter. You don't draw up legal contracts with your children. You trust them because that's what love requires. On the other hand, my father died asking why Carol didn't come, and Carol was 20 minutes away. I don't know which truth is heavier. I've been carrying both of them for 3 years. If you know the answer, I'd genuinely like to hear it, because I still don't.